And so when we're talking about ecosystem, we're talking about the relationships in home, at home, and our collective home is this planet we all live on. Ecology as home and knowledge, the knowing of our home and the study of our home, ecology. And the economy, which I think all three of these things we'll be kind of touching on today, as the management of home. And so oftentimes when people are talking about economics, they assume it's like the stock market, it's about dollars and cents. It is in one way, but that is because that is the way we have built capitalism as the way that we manage our home, that we manage our economy. And so part of this idea of just transition is for us to really think about what does it mean to shift and change our relationship to home. When we talk about ecological justice, we're talking about being in a state of balance, right? Refinding the balance that we have lost and that we see all around us through the violence, through the catastrophes, through the chaos, that we are currently not in that balance. And so the idea of ecological justice is for us to find a more holistic, better way forward. So the just transition framework, the concept of it is really moving us from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy. That we want to stop the bad, stop the harm, stop the things that are really creating so much suffering and hurt, and start to build the new, start to heal, start to bring this world we know that is possible into being. And so in that, shifting from a worldview that is based on consumerism and deeply steeped in colonial mindsets, shift from having a resource methodology that is based in extraction, where we dig, we burn, we dump. We have a very, it's just constant cycle of exploitation. A governance model that is militaristic and oppressive oftentimes, and purposes where the main purpose is to get money, to be in the 1%, that there's an enclosure of wealth and power as opposed to spreading it amongst everyone so everyone can be well and healthy and joyful. So in doing that, when we talk about just transition and the work I do all in my city, in my region, in the country, is that we want to shift the rules and draw money and power to the local level and to those who have most suffered from these extractive systems, that we want to shift to a place where everyone can succeed. We invest into the power to feed and grow those who really have been most marginalized and most vulnerable in the current system. And so when we talk about a regenerative economy, we want to shift to a worldview where we are valuing most caring and sacredness. We want to move to a place where the resources are regenerative, that they go and flow in balance and symbiosis with our planet's resources and abilities and capacities. That we want a governance model that upholds deep democracy, real democracy, people's democracy, right? Where people actually have say in what happens to them. And that we have a purpose, that we are all guided and driven by purpose that is about ecological and social well-being for everybody, that nobody needs to suffer, that actually this planet could provide for everybody if we had a cooperative model instead of an exploitative model. And this model, it is about climate justice, but it's also about racial justice. It's also about disability justice. It's about us creating a way for everybody to be able to live in a way that they can flourish and thrive. We are a collective primarily of artists. So how do artists respond, and why are artists in a good position to do this work of just transition and just recovery? And so this framework of just recovery comes out of years of experience, and in particular out of the hurricane season 2017, where Hurricane Harvey and Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico. We saw a lot of need to really separate the concept of a regular recovery from disaster to a just recovery. And when we're talking about that, we're saying, how do we move from a status quo that has the tendency to provide aid in the moment, but from large NGOs, large bodies who oftentimes either are slow or don't know the needs of their community, or communities do not feel safe to access those resources because of harm that's been caused by those entities in other instances. To an extraction, with the first stage of like immediate aid, then extraction, where there is often, Hurricane Katrina, for where I live, is the perfect example of, after the hurricane, there was an extraction of labor and land from the communities who were being, impacted, to then eventually displace them. But there's long-term community displacement, privatization, and gentrification that happens as a result of disaster capitalist interests that seem to, every time a disaster happens, ends up becoming richer. And so we want to see a just recovery where there's response and mutual aid that happens at the ground level to communities on the ground to meet their needs, to those who are most impacted and vulnerable, because they know the community. They know people who know each other can best support each other at a more local level. That then after the disaster, folks can be provided the resources, support for everyone to get back to work and into their homes, not distracted, not displaced, but actually able to rebuild. So then in the long term, these communities are stronger instead of not existing at all, which is happening in places like Puerto Rico right now. We're seeing that happen. We definitely saw that happen in New Orleans, that people actually are stronger at the end instead of gone, instead of invisible, displaced. We believe there's a different way, and that this just recovery could be a bridge to the just transition that we're talking about. Community-based artists are people who are trusted. So effective mutual aid in these times of crisis can be deployed more effectively with existing trust. And so artists, community artists, are well positioned to do this work. And this example of what has happened in this last week is really touching to me in modeling that model that I was just talking about, just transition. We used the crowd funds to buy 200 Footprint Farms CSA boxes, which Footprint Farms is a Black woman-owned farm in Jackson, Mississippi, to provide 1,400 pounds of food for undocumented Mississippians who are impacted by the polar vortex and not able to access kind of SNAP benefits and all those kinds of things that are available to folks who have their papers. So this is an example of us being able to raise funds from community, get it into the hands of a community project to help community members who needed it. And this is the kind of work we want to be able to continue to support and see flourish.